Okay, it is 6 o'clock. I am on Monday, 6 o'clock on Monday, August 5th, 2024. I'm calling to order the Town of Rutland Select Board meeting. We are meeting in the basement of Rutland Public Library. We are on Zoom for remote participation as well as live streamed and recorded for local access as well as YouTube and other social media outlets. We are a full 5-member board in person tonight, just for the record there, and let's stand for the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have approval of minutes, treasury warrant and payroll. So we have approval of treasury warrant 25-3 and 25-PW3.
I make a motion to approve Treasury warrant 25-3 and 25-PW3.
We have a motion, is there a second? Second. Motion and a second. Any comments, questions, concerns? We've closed out 24 and I believe everyone is accountant and treasurer collector and administrator working on closing everything out with department heads, right?
Yep.
Thank you. Motion and a second, roll call, Harry.
Second aye.
That's aye.
Ledger aye.
Galvin aye.
Whitman aye. Thank you. We have a few sets of minutes, we'll separate them out because I believe that yeah. So we had asked to hold the the July 8th meeting minutes, those everyone was present for. So is there a conversation about them, or are we good for a motion?
Make a motion to approve meeting minutes from July 8th, 2024.
We have a motion, is there a second? Second. Motion and a second, comments, questions, concerns?
I've got a question. Tamika, when Austin recommended or suggested that we should move forward so the capital improvement CIPC did not have to wait any longer to start their business and consider Susan, Jen objected to that. I didn't see that in the minutes anywhere.
I don't have them in front of me. I know that I made mention of Jen objecting, but that she said it was not because of the people, but because of the process. But I don't specifically remember if Austin's name was mentioned in there, so.
Yeah, it was. Is that something?
And that was the July 8th meeting and not the
Yeah, we're doing July 8th, right, or 25th?
No, we're doing the 8th, but I was trying to remember if that conversation was at the 8th or if it was at the meeting of the 22nd.
Yeah, it was a conversation, except it wasn't here, that's why I'm asking.
I think you did say that at the 22nd, not on the 8th.
Whatever the first meeting was, I believe it was, so if it was the 8th, then I think it was the 8th, but just, I guess a note about minutes, I mean, I think a good practice for minutes is to make them less of a transcript and more of a summary of the discussion. And I think that is what Tamika does a really good job on, is trying to summarize the discussion. I think if you wanna go to a transcript, that's why we have recordings. Because these pages would be very long if we had quite literally a verbal transcript of what everyone said, including members of the public as well, so certainly if there's comments and you want amendments to it, I think obviously the rest of the board would have to accept those amendments, but as you know, cause you've taken some minutes in your career as well, I'm sure, there's supposed to be a high-level synopsis of the discussion.
The reason I mentioned, discussion was very intense. And I just wanted to make sure it showed the intensity from all members of the board. That's all.
I mean, I think that this is, we asked to hold them and asked everyone to provide comments and feedback to Tamika if there were concerns. So in that interim, so I'm not aware of much changes that were provided.
I went back and re-reviewed and I did send Tamika some comments.
And this is not against Tamika, not at all. Going forward, I wanna make sure that all members of the board are representative in terms of discussion and not just one flavor.
You would hate the way the city of Worcester does their minutes,
I probably would.
because
Probably would.
I'm crazy, but I watch all the city council meetings and they have some very spirited discussions and the minutes say, city council discussed this and voted this. You're getting a lot more information here, than I think a lot of multi-member bodies in other communities, so. But certainly I think we can take that as constructive feedback for future minutes to present to the board.
I guess my concern is it involved a particular person of a particular committee of which the committee was formed, that was the discussion. And where it was involving one particular committee, it needs to reflect a little bit better notes in terms of how that discussion was. I mean, as far as this is concerned, this is good, but it doesn't get into the depth that I think should have gotten into. That's my only comment.
We have a motion and a second. Additional conversation? Roll call, Harry.
Second, nay.
Mattson, aye.
Ledger I.
Galvin, aye.
Whitman, aye. Thank you, Tamika. And I know MGL, well, not MGL, but the kind of Attorney General's office and legal is always kind of reviewing how much information should be provided in minutes and keeping it, you know, generally the guidance is keeping it at a higher level rather than the details. And I know that almost every MMA meeting, legal does a follow-up as to kind of the trends and what the state's looking to see, so thank you. We have the July 22nd meeting minutes, that was a regular meeting, I believe Tom was absent at that one.
I make a motion to approve July 22, 2024 regular meeting minutes as presented.
We have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Questions, comments, concerns, conversation? Roll call, Harry.
Second, aye.
Mattson, aye.
Ledger I.
Whitman, aye.
Galvin, abstain.
Sorry. I know, sorry. And then, thank you, Tamika. We have the July 25th meeting minutes. This was our goals and objectives kind of brainstorming session. My take on these is that this was a record of the meeting itself and not our actual presentation of goals and objectives to be adopted. That will probably be hopefully next meeting.
Yes. And I did make sure to include that language in there, so if anybody does read the post-it, they understand that this was just discussion.
Right, this was kind of all those ideas and everything that were discussed. So approval of this is not by any means approving any of what's coming before us as our official goals and objectives, just that this is what the conversation was. So I would entertain a motion.
Motion to approve July 25th, 2024 goals and objectives meeting minutes as presented.
We have a motion, is there a second?
Second motion.
Questions, comments, concerns, conversation?
You said this wasn't the final, so we'll be discussing this.
Correct, this is just a record of the
Okay.
meeting itself, yep. And so the approval of these is by no means an adoption of anything, it's just that this is what we talked about.
Okay.
Roll call, Harry.
Second, aye.
Mattson, aye.
Ledger I.
Galvin, abstain.
Whitman, aye. Thank you, Tamika. Is there anyone here for public comment? Anyone on Zoom for public comment? Hearing none, we will move into communications, member comments, announcements, and town administrator update. I will keep mine brief. I just wanna say thanks to everyone that went to the Woo Sox Rutland Takeover Woo Sox Day yesterday. I understand that it ended abruptly with a rain delay, went into a rain delay and then was closed or canceled. So I think the beginning of the ceremonies went off without a hitch, so I'm hopeful that everyone that was participating in that had their opportunity to shine. I was unable to make it unfortunately, but I believe there were a few of us that were there, so thank you for attending, thanks everyone in the community for attending and participating, and thank you to the Woo Sox for encouraging that fun community interactions. We have the Friday night concerts on the Common are still happening, if the weather ever decides to agree.
2 in a row, right?
I think they had one and then another rain out, yeah. So this upcoming Friday, 6 o'clock, 6 to 9 on the town common. I believe this Friday is Midnight Riders. I wanna thank the events committee as well as all the sponsors, and the food trucks and everyone who's participating in those to make them a successful evening. Town has a notice of public auction for surplus equipment. It's posted on the website. I don't have off the top of my head the dates. From August 12th to the 26th at 3 p.m. It's on Municipid. You can find it on the link through the town website. And just released this morning, I think, was the town unclaimed property. And so take a look and see, we adopted that MGL at town meeting in May, I believe. And so that list is also on the town website as well as town social media, so take a look. Reach out to any friends or family that you know that might have unclaimed Rutland property there. CMRPC is still looking for a climate action survey, I believe that's still happening. And that's for kind of all of Central Mass. That information is on the website as well. We're into August, school's going to be starting soon, so good luck to all the sports teams that have started preseason or started regular season practices and work. And keep checking on your neighbors, it's hot, this hot humid weather is not great, so keep checking on your neighbors. We have cooling areas, just the Council on Aging and Community Center on Glenwood Road, the library, public safety, the town hall, town annex all have hours, and the pool's open. So please check on your neighbors, utilize, reach out if you need assistance either through Council on Aging or through our office, if there's anything or you're aware of anyone needing any sort of assistance. Any other member comments? Austin, have at it, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening. Just a few updates. I've included a memo in your packet, also published on the town website as well. We've been working for a few months now, Police Chief Monaco, Public Works Director Kolofsky, and members of the Wachusett Regional School District. After an extensive amount of public feedback from residents, parents, and just the at-large community, one of the challenges we have with parent drop-off for Naquag Elementary School and pickup is the loading, if you will, that's on Main Street. Significant safety issue. Traffic's not a big fan of it. Mass DOT is not a big fan of it. It actually, in some respects, is actually unlawful to have parent drop-off and pickup kind of queuing on Main Street. So we tried to find a solution. The police chief had an idea to reconfigure the driveway that consists, that is included between Naquag Elementary School and Central Street Middle School. The proposal is to convert it to one-way northbound from Central Tree to Naquag. Modification will include addition of 50 parallel parking spots, as well as a travel lane. The parking spots during the school year, during pickup and drop-off will be the pickup and drop-off lane, so there'll be no parking allowed during those times. The rest of the year, it's parking spots for the various sporting events, concerts, things like that. The police chief and public works director have ordered the signs, they'll be here next week. Upon notification of the board, we will do an extensive amount of outreach to inform the community of the change to the driveway. We'll be doing social media, we'll make sure that there's signage, the school district will be notifying parents. This is an effort to just try to make sure that it's as safe as possible for all. And the good thing is we own the property, and right now it's a driveway. It's actually not a public way. So it allows us a little bit of flexibility to change things a little bit more dynamically than you would if it was Main Street or Palmagussit. Obviously, this is a change, so we'll have to just continue to train people and install maybe more signage than necessary. Make sure that there's adequate details and police coverage just to make sure that people are aware of the change. There'll be some mix-ups. I use it as a cut-through sometimes when I wanna get to Maple Ave. You won't be able to do that anymore. But I just wanted to notify the board and make sure that you're aware of it. I've also included diagrams in the appendix of my report to make you aware, and we'll publish those online as well, just to give you an idea of what that looks like. There he is. But just happy to take any questions on that, or comments that you have as well.
Do you have a?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Through the chair. Where will that start? Where Harmony Homes lets off?
So it's gonna be one way from essentially the end of Rutland Heights Way, which is that nicely paved part. It'll be one way from there to just about where you can turn around at Naquag. So the driveway view, it's not a very wide driveway, hence why we thought it made sense to do some parallel parking. So actually, it'll be kind of reverse parallel parking, so you have to learn how to parallel park on the left side of the road. And the thought was, well, we wanted people to be able to get out on the sidewalk, which
Yeah.
exists on that side of the road. And then the kind of the throughway will, if you will be on the right side going northbound.
I have a question if I,
Sure, yeah.
I don't know if anyone else, just as far as, I imagine then more traffic will be coming out, less traffic will be coming out at the Maple Ave intersection with, Main Street, and more traffic will be coming out at Naquag and, Main Street, and so maybe at least initially some more police visibility and potential help directing, cause I know sometimes, depending on the time of year, the visibility line of sight
Yeah.
isn't quite as clear. Hopefully it'll be better if no one's parked on Main Street there, but if there's a lot of people, especially making a left out and everything.
Yeah.
To try to,
Yeah, we're definitely gonna have a kind of a deeper than normal sort of monitoring phase, as we roll this out to make sure that it's working and, as you know, kind of right now and especially in the morning, the police kind of sit at the intersection of Naquag and Main just to see and make sure that everything is safer there. I suspect we'll have to do a little bit, to your point, on the Maple and Rutland Heights Way side as well. This is also just trying to get ahead of the development that's happening at Harmony Place, training all of those future residents not to use, try to lessen using the driveway as kind of a pass-through, because we've got a lot of folks that use that, whether it's baseball, softball, soccer, I've seen people play there, the concerts, those two schools have a lot of people there. So if it's easier for them to avoid the traffic and just go to Maple Ave, try to let them go that way, cause I think it's much safer than passing through a school zone, so. But yeah, we'll definitely try to make sure that we're monitoring where people are and practicing good habits.
I think a lot of thought has gone into it, both from public safety as well as a public works perspective, and so I appreciate that, and it's been concern and getting more and more of a concern over the years, so I appreciate everyone, change can be hard, but willing to try to work on this to make it safer for everyone.
Yeah, this also significantly helps with some of the parking challenges that we have at both of the schools, especially when there's sports going on. I've seen it, I mean, people are parking definitely where they shouldn't. So kind of creating some dedicated parking spaces. I'll have to get used to it, cause I don't think I've ever parked on the left side of a street. So
And you live in the city, so you should
yeah,
have.
I know, I'll avoid it if I have to, if I can, but just wanted to make the community and the board aware of that, if you get any
I
questions.
actually have one more question.
Sure, yep.
Add to Leah's, the going out of the Naquag driveway, turning that left there. I know they mow some of that hillside there, but there's a whole big section of overgrown out, it's just weeds. I don't think there's actual trees there, I'm pretty sure it's still the property, but it's starting to encroach on line of sight there.
Okay, at the Naquag and Main Street, is that what you're
Yeah,
talking? Okay,
it's between the road and the sidewalk, there's like
Okay.
a section, it's like overgrown. It's just weeds, it looks like small trees at this point, but
Yeah.
I think
And
they're
it's
just
down
weeds.
closer to the property
Yes.
line of like
Yes,
heading west on Main Street.
but if there's gonna be more traffic going out that way, you might wanna see if DPW can do that.
okay,
I think that's my biggest concern is
yeah.
that piece right there.
Yeah.
is-
And there's a lot of, I always wait the extra few seconds to, especially if somebody's letting you go left, because people go around the people that are letting people go, so
Yeah.
just keeping an eye on.
yeah, I mean, I think especially, unfortunately, I frequent Dunkin' Donuts too many times, I will, and I think a lot of people try to avoid any way that they have to take a left turn, like I think people will take even a longer route and maybe turn around at the fire station lot.
Yep.
Just to avoid going left, and you know, that's, unfortunately, that's just
Part of the deal.
part of it, yeah, I mean,
Um,
remember Kelly Square, you drive through and close your eyes and
Yes.
pray?
Yes.
We've got our own little Kelly Square here,
Yeah.
but,
My other quick question is, if we do this with the driveway, does that impact any future potential to actually make it a public way to
Nope.
get chapter 90?
no. Cause that's a great point, right now, it's just a driveway.
Yeah.
So we don't receive any public funds from Mass DOT, chapter 90 funds for it, so, you know, the small amount of funding is actually just being used from, local funds, general funds that the police department has to purchase some of the signage and the equipment, temporary measures, but, we, and the town reserves every right to convert it to a public way, and, at that point, we go to the select board to talk about traffic flow and configurations, so. I was stalling a little bit for you, but I just,
I got a tour of your campus.
it's all
I
good.
wasn't sure where it was. I went and saw Seth, he rescued me and said it's in the basement of the library. So-
Okay, alright. Well, it's my pleasure to introduce to the board and to the community, our new building commissioner and zoning enforcement officer, Harold Leeming. Extensive amount of experience as a, building official through his career, and most recently, retired state building official, for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, so just wanna introduce him, and
Awesome.
if you have your little stump speech.
I'll give you a little bio. Yeah, I'm originally born in Portland, Oregon. Moved out here when I was 9 years old, lived in Brimfield, Massachusetts all my life. I was a selectman in that town, 2 terms. I feel your pain. I was also the zoning enforcement officer, I was the ZBA chair, I was on the planning board. Did all that just so I could learn the craft here. I've always built things, construction most of my life. Became the building inspector in Wales, Massachusetts, and then I took over the town of Brimfield, and then I took over the town of Munson, and then I finally landed at the state level. Oversaw 78 towns, including Rutland. Billy Casanelli, we understand what happened to him unfortunately, but he was a real good friend of mine. We went to building inspector school together. And Lynn is a real good friend of mine. And when he got sick in 2019, I had the honor of working for your town for 11 weeks, until we realized he wasn't getting back, unfortunately. So, and I tell everybody this, and I meant it, I just talked to the gentlemen from the finance committee, I'm the worst person, and I thank God you have name tags. I'm really bad with names, I don't know why, it's ever since I think it's because I'm getting old. But I explained to him that these jobs are a privilege, and I understand there's 351 cities and towns, so there's 351 commissioners, and there's 6 million people. So I always took that as a compliment that you guys hired me. Me and Austin, get along very well. And I have over 20 years' experience in this job. I work 3 days a week here. Can't work anymore, only do 24 hours with vacations and all that. I do 1,200 hours from the state. I get my retirement check, goes right in the bank. I just really enjoy working here. This is a town very similar to Brimfield. I think got a couple more people, but we have the giant flea markets and all that. I have to deal with that. But I just want to say thank you very much for having trust in me. I treat everybody with respect. And sometimes we get difficult people. I bite my lip, I try my best. But
I've dealt with the worst of them. So you can ask any question you want. I'm prepared for everything, I think. I prefer some questions. So,
Thank you, Harold.
Thank
thank
you.
you. All set?
Thank you.
Thank
I have
you,
a
guys.
question.
Oh, go ahead.
You've been working with this town in the past,
Yes,
and now you're here as the building inspector.
yes.
What do you see as challenges and what do you see as great things that we've done already in this town that helps you take care of the other issues that may be some complications in this town?
Well, first of all, I'm gonna say the good things. You have a fantastic core of people who work for your town, very knowledgeable, been around for a long time. And I say 20 years, there's a lot of people with more than 20 years' experience here. You have a Board of Health, a director who used to be your fire chief, very smart guy. Seth, I just dealt with him, very smart, understand NFPA and all that. You have a ZBA, so I read some of the decisions, pretty in-depth. Planning board the same way, I'm looking forward to working with them. Seems like they all get along. Your biggest issues, I think, is economic development. We should have more, not industry, but more commercial, because they don't come with a liability of $37,500. That's $15,000 per student, and average of 2.5, so it's $37,500. And we usually, your tax bills, I don't know what the average is, but I'm guessing it's about $45,000 to $5,000. So you're losing $32,500 per house we build. I'm not saying anything, you get some beautiful homes here, beautiful. I think we need to concentrate a little bit on economic development, and I have no issue with build as many houses you want, that's what I do for a living. But I would like to see some more economic development, because that's free cash, boom, and I think that's what we need. Again, I don't live here, I'm not gonna push anything, you asked me a question, that's the answer I have.
Appreciate that.
Any other questions or anything like that? No. Awesome, all right, well, thank you,
Nice to meet
thank you very much, nice meeting you,
Thank you.
and thank you, Austin, and see you later, young lady, I'll see you tomorrow. I did get kinda in-depth in some of them, I was gonna have to.
Oh, it's all good, it's all good. I'm a good staller. And I think we're very fortunate to have Harold. I think he's been already a wealth of knowledge to a lot of our town staff. Has really helped us kind of already tremendously in terms of trying to plan for the future as well and think about the big picture organizationally. So thankful that he joined us, and optimistic about the future of our land use department. So, just to quickly roll through, I've got some more updates. Just an update on the regional curbside trash and recycling program. If you recall, about a month or so ago, I gave an update. I received approval from the Board of Health to advance this project. All three towns, Rutland, Hubbardston, and Princeton's Board of Health have all approved this project to move forward. We're in the phase of a little bit more research and technical assistance from Mass DEP. The town of Hubbardston has received a technical assistance grant to help the three of us advance this project a little bit more. What we really need is some more data. So what we'll be doing is we'll start actually engaging with prospective haulers in the three towns that could provide these services, some of the smaller ones, some of the larger ones, and get an idea what the perspective and what the potential cost would be for each of the users. So this technical assistance grant has already done some analysis for us. We'll do some outreach. We're planning on holding a informational session to be held with the haulers in Rutland in September, to kind of talk with them, see what they think would make sense for the three towns. And then we'll move forward from there. Also, they're going to help us prepare a bidding package. Now, trash and recycling is actually exempt from 30B, but as you know, when you go through procurement, you wanna get the best deal, right? So we intend to do an RFP process for the three communities, and see what makes sense, because, lowest bid is great, but it doesn't always sometimes get you the best service. So we wanna make sure that this makes sense for Rutland taxpayers, Hubbardston and Princeton taxpayers as well. So we're still working through there. We have a draft bid package just with some high level information, and we'll be doing a little bit more data collection, and especially after that September informational session. We'll likely go out to bid just to see what that provides, and then we'll go back to the Board of Health and Select Board to kind of formalize that arrangement. So just wanna let you know that we're still advancing that project as well. Any questions on that?
Just so I understand, this will be a regional RFP.
Correct. Of which at some point we'll also have to ask for an intermunicipal agreement between the three towns. As of right now, we're in the talking stage, right? So we didn't feel it was necessary to formalize that arrangement yet. Once we get to the point where we're actually having contractual discussions and you know, bidding, if you will, we'll definitely need blessing from each of the select boards to make sure that we're really in on this program. Even when you do an IMA, it doesn't you know, lock you into anything. If ultimately Rutland or Princeton or Hubbardston decides that it doesn't make sense for their communities, you always have the opportunity to back out, but very much still in the due diligence phase for this project.
And, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
The IMA would be at the select board level, the RFP, is there Board of Health coordination also for, because I know this is what I guess I need to learn a little bit more is where Board of Health sits with, because they're trash and recycling.
Yeah.
Where select board sits.
Yeah, so the Board of Health is going to be critical for making sure that all of our hauler regulations are uniform, because the last thing I think a hauler wants is to come and have to deal with 3 different Board of Health hauler regulations. That also includes some of the fees. 2 of the communities also have a long-term agreement with Wheelabrator and Millbury, essentially is where your trash goes. That agreement is set to expire in 2027, so there's also a consideration from the Board of Health in the 2 communities to see if it makes sense to continue that relationship. But ultimately, the award of trash and recycling is actually the responsibility of the Board of Health and the Chief Procurement Officer myself. So the recommendation, I'll make sure to give proper notification to the board to make sure you're aware, but ultimately it rests with the Board of Health and communities.
Question?
Sure.
Even though this will be a regional, are the bills still go to the individual homes?
Yes.
Okay.
So essentially, this is going to be an interesting one because as we go through this phase, we'll also have to figure out who makes sense, and just from a scale, you know, it probably wouldn't make sense for all 3 of us to do separate billings. It would make sense maybe to allocate resources to one community to do billing for all 3, just from an efficiency standpoint. So it'll be interesting because we'll have to make sure that that bill is different than your regular tax bill, but you can see that you're actually paying for your regional. You know, essentially, I think what we're gonna have to do is make a separate bill that says regional trash or something. But again, I think that's kind of why we're trying to have these discussions, to kind of flesh all that out, so it's hopefully looks like it's a little bit organized, so.
Follow-up? Will there still be availability for an individual home to pick their own trash haul?
Yes, yep. By its nature, it'll be, everyone is in the program, it'll be an opt-out program, so each year there'll be, it's the responsibility of the property owner to make sure that they opt out. And just, this prospective program would only apply to single-family homes, so it would not apply to multifamily dwellings, commercial dwellings, just single-family homes.
So Countryside wouldn't be part of this, so to speak.
Correct. Which is about, gonna round up and say about 5,500 single-family houses between the 3 communities. Rutland is the largest, we're about 2,500. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Okay. It's exciting news, trash and recycling. It really is. Just FYI, there's no action necessary from the board, but just wanna let you know that New England Race Events will be hosting their annual Mid-State Massive Ultra Trail event the evening of October 12th and 13th. Utilizing portions of the rail trail, approximately 200 runners are expected to participate this year. This was run by Public Safety, they're aware of it and have approved of the event, and there are no anticipated road closures for this event. We have unfortunately received notification from Mass DOT that the culvert replacement for Molten Pond for the Route 56 project has been delayed after review of the portable dam, which is the temporary dam that they were going to install while they replaced the culvert. Some comments from the Office of Dam Safety with respect to some of the calculations. They have rejected the proposal. Mass DOT and their engineering consultants need to go back to the drawing table and modify those a bit to satisfy some of the comments from Office of Dam Safety. That project, or that, project was supposed to start today. It'd be about a 2 to 3 week closure to try to get it done just before school. Unfortunately, that will not be the case, so we will, when we receive further information from Mass DOT, we'll make sure that the community is aware, and especially the school district. We wanted to really avoid the impact on the school buses. We were estimating probably a 3-day impact. We did communicate with the schools, they were fine with that. The school district and the bus company, they were fine with that. Unfortunately now, when it does start back up, it'll be a much more significant impact on the school. It also may be the case where they may try to kick it to next summer again, and do it when there's really not a lot of people on the road. Any questions on that one? No? Okay. I just wanna recognize and congratulate, Public Works Director Chris Kolofsky. He is a Rhodes Scholar, which is, an interesting award from the UMass Transportation Center Bay State Roads Training Program. He's completed over 35 hours of training through that program. This is a recognition for public works officials for just continued professional development in the highway and public works industry. He's done a lot of training, and I just want to recognize his efforts. Public Works Department is doing a lot of work. It's summer, a lot of projects. If you went by Glenwood, you'll notice that they've done some cleanup work today. Was kind of the chipping out some of the bad and ugly concrete and asphalt. They've taken that out, and over the next few days they'll be installing new concrete to patch that and make it much safer. You know, as we go to town meeting, the condition of that front walkway is in terrible shape. There's safety issues, there's accessibility issues, so we're looking to address that and make that a little bit better for the public and the students. And then I sent a note to the board a few weeks ago. We'll be utilizing some of the remaining funding from the winter recovery funds to complete the paving on the Woodhouse and the old fire station parking lot. That paving is expected to be completed next week. And then as I mentioned, just the next few pages are just some of the proposed slides for the configuration of the driveway. And happy to take any questions if the board has any.
Anything for the town administrator from the board? Thank you, Ruskin. I don't believe we have any current old business. We can move quickly to appointments and resignations. These are a little bit different because these are not boards and committees, these are set appointments. We have the town constables. This year, I believe we have one. This is a 1-year appointment. We have a letter of interest from Mark Mosio, who currently serves as a constable.
So I was just gonna clarify, we do also have another constable that you guys had reappointed, Dick Sauls, during the appointment process. Unfortunately, Mark couldn't come forward due to an injury, so that's why he's a little bit late on submitting.
Thank you.
What does the constable do?
So
I mean, nowadays, I know what they used to do, what does a constable do nowadays?
if somebody needs to be served, and they are resident in Rutland, they can serve legal papers to somebody at their home.
And I think also aren't they sometimes involved in accurately posting, signing off and posting warrants and
That's
everything?
correct. Yep, we need the constable to post the warrant in 5 public locations, according to Mass General Law. There's no badge though. I mean, we could do like a star,
Yeah, I mean,
you know?
I've been in law enforcement for 27 years, and I can honestly tell you, I don't even know what the hell a constable is anymore.
I'm qualified to be a constable, so that
Yeah,
goes to
I
show
mean,
you don't need a lot, so.
So I believe we have a motion kind of prepared for us, if the, we can do the motion for we can separate them out and do the, constable first.
Make a motion to approve Mark Moiseo as a constable.
For 1 year.
Oh. Let's try that, forget about that. Motion to appoint Mark Moiseo as constable for 1 year and to reappoint election.
I think just wait, we'll do the one, we'll just do
They don't wanna
the,
do that all at once, no.
oh, here it is. We have a motion to appoint Mark Mosio as constable for 1 year. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Conversation? Roll call, Harry.
Second, I.
Mattson, aye.
Ledger I.
Whitman, aye. We have a list of election workers, from, I think this generally comes from the clerk, through the clerk's office. This is, appointed, election workers for 1 year appointments, as presented in our packets. There's a sample motion at the bottom, of the, what is that?
Move that the slate as presented be appointed election officers for the town of Rutland pursuant to MGL chapter 54, section 12.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Conversation?
How are these individuals chosen?
So I spoke with Anita, unfortunately she wasn't able to attend, she apologizes, but essentially they try to balance it out based on the parties as best as they can. She made sure to indicate which party, each worker was associated with to give the board an idea. Unfortunately, they're likely never gonna be able to get it 50-50, but they tried their best. A lot of these folks are ones who have done it for several years and have just wanted to continue.
We have a roll call, motion and a second. I'm excited to see that there's students. I know that Anita has really been working on trying to get more local advocacy from the, I think, I can't remember if 16 or 17 and older, involvement in local government and elections, so I appreciate seeing that. Thank you to everyone.
Follow-up? I see there's a D and an R in some places. If there's no designation, does that mean they're independent?
Yes.
Okay.
Roll call, Harry.
Second, I.
Mattson, aye.
Whitman, aye. Thank you. We have a resignation from Peter Crane, who has submitted his resignation for his participation in the following committees effective today, last week, August 2nd. He will be resigning from Conservation Commission, Earthworks Board, and the Cable Advisory Committee. And he is working to transition his work and information to other, to the rest of the existing committees.
I will recuse myself from this one.
So the resignation has officially been certified through the town clerk's office. It's just the board's requirement to accept. We don't really have any option other than accepting. We can't force people to stay on boards and committees that they are resigning from. So I entertain a motion to accept the resignation of Peter Crane from Conservation Commission, Earthworks Board, and Cable Advisory Committee.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Questions, comments, conversation?
I would just like to make a comment through the chair that Peter has served this town for many, many years, particularly invaluable on the planning board, and I for one am, I know he probably wanted to do this with his life, so, but I think he'll be missed and he was a valuable asset to the town.
I wanna reiterate that I believe Peter's been involved for 14 plus years in some capacity.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of knowledge and information and everything. So I'm sorry to see him go, and I also understand that sometimes life gives you what it gives you, or decisions need to be made, so. We have a motion and a second. Roll call, Harry.
Second, I, with regret.
Also, he's recusing himself.
Ledger, I with regret and thanks.
Galvin I.
Whitman, I, with regrets and much appreciation. Thank you. Moving on to new and special business, we have a one-day liquor license application. A few weeks ago, the president of Rutland Little League, Jonathan Miller, had come in to give us a heads up and kind of an invitation to the Rutland Little League concert that they'll be having to honor, I believe, 50 years of Marshfield on Saturday, August 31st. This is the liquor license application for Seven Stalls Brewing to be able to serve at that concert. This is one that has come in under our newly adopted application process. So thank you, Tamika, for working with everyone for that.
Make a motion to approve the one-day liquor license application as presented for Seven Saws Brewery for the Little League event in Marshfield on August 31st, 2024.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Conversation. Roll call, Harry.
Second I.
Mattson aye.
Ledger, I.
Galvin I.
Whitman, I. Thank you.
May I make a comment?
Sure.
Tamika, now that I see this actually in practice, great job,
Nice, I'm glad you like it.
great job. You know, everything is there that I can see, the payment, yes, is there and all that, so, nice, thank you.
Moving on, we have a joint conversation with about the Wood House and a little bit of maybe the studio as well with the Historic Commission. Unfortunately, I think the commission doesn't have a quorum tonight given vacations and everything. So I think that they've had some work with the society. I don't know if the board remembers I think back in December sometime, the board, the Historical Society had come before the board asking the board's support to place the Wood House on, I believe it was the Massachusetts State Historical Registry. Then that opened up some discussion as far as the lease agreement and everything of that nature, and additional feedback that I believe the commission now has been looped into as well. So between the commission and Austin and Tamika and us, I think that I view this more as a brief conversation, kind of fact finding, get a sense of things, not for any sort of official decision or anything.
Just quick for the record, I'm just stepping down from the select board for the discussion.
Alright, so, yeah, really the idea here is to try to pick up where not just the Historical Commission, but also the Historical Society and previous commissions have left off. There have been actually several attempts to try to put the Wood House and Studio on the state register, and the state would be responsible for nominating it for the national register. Right now, we have only one property in the entire town that is on either register, and that's the Rufus Putnam House. That was done independently by that homeowner. So that's the one we have at the moment. Franklin T. Wood, I think most of you are familiar with him and his work, I would assume? Yes? So he was obviously a resident of that house. He did a lot of his work in that studio that the town currently owns. And we're just trying to give that the recognition that it's due. Number one, the studio, I mean, the artwork that he produced there is in the Smithsonian. It's very well known. So I would very much argue that the building itself is historic. The studio and the house. There's a north-facing window there, the purpose for which is for an artist to be able to see the artwork from as neutral a light as possible, rather than having the sun glare in at a certain time of the day. So for it to be nice and consistent, features such as that. So there's more to it than meets the eye. Franklin T. Wood, there was a question as to when the studio was built. I don't have that date on me, but he died in 1945, so it was definitely before 45. I would venture to guess well before, I would say, I would guess at least 20 years before, but I could be wrong. I'll have to look that up. The Historical Society, when they were working on the Wood House, that was what was brought before the board last time. And it was only the house that was approved by the board.
Yeah.
The Mass Historical Commission, who is responsible for bringing all of this together and nominating, placing properties on the state register. They came back to the Rutland Historical Society and said that both buildings, the house and the studio, need to be kept together and on the same application. Basically, the reason they gave for that was that both buildings were associated with wood, and for that reason they need to be kept together. His artwork, his residence, same owner, same work, same location, even though they're two separate parcels. So that was their rationale. In order to put this on, or in order for us to recommend that it be put on the state and hopefully national register, we would need the select board's approval for both structures. Doing so would allow us opportunity for quite a bit of grant money. Much of it is matching 50-50, which if we have the Community Preservation Act, that should be a big help. If not, there are other grant opportunities at the state level where the Historical Society could apply, and if they had funds, the organization would match them, or the state would match them. A lot of it would involve restoration, preservation, repair, ADA accessibility. So this might help us move toward possibly even getting the Wood House being ADA accessible if we needed to use it for a town meeting. I mean, not a open town, full town meeting, but Board or Commission or something like that. Right now, that would not be possible. It wouldn't even be possible for us as a commission to meet in that building right now. For research, we couldn't do that. So there's a lot to consider in that regard, but I think it would be very beneficial to the town for the sake of those structures, for preserving them and for our use of them. Fiscally and physically, not to mention the, for lack of a better term, bragging rights and just recognition and being able to promote these two structures as historical sites they are in the town of Rutland. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts?
If that becomes historical property, what limitations does the town have in the future with that property then?
If it's the National Register, I believe there might be some research that would need to be done if there are, if it were to be demolished, for example, or if there were extensive work. I think I had this in here somewhere. I could look that up.
Harry, can I answer one thing? What little I do know about historical designations,
Yeah.
you can almost do nothing with the property.
Yeah.
It's pretty much forever. I've worked for the state for almost 30 years, and there are buildings that the state can't even move forward in making corrections because they're designated as historical. So this is forever if we do this.
I think,
Yeah, oftentimes, especially if we intend on pursuing some of the grant opportunities that Peter had mentioned, which would be great, I think, especially for some of the capital needs with both of these buildings. If you're using state or federal funds, it triggers Mass Historic Commission review and approval. I believe if you're using local funds, it doesn't necessarily trigger that review, but I think in the interest of being a good partner and say it's historically significant, it's very similar to some communities that have historic district commissions. If you do any work oftentimes in those areas that is considered a historic district, you end up having to go through historic district commission review and approval. So not with everything, but oftentimes it will trigger some sort of review, probably from the state historic commission.
The reason I asked the question, does the historical commission foresee outgrowing that building in the next 20, 30 years? If this is forever,
You mean the society?
society, yeah.
I can't speak for the Historical Society, but from what I can gather, I've always seen that particular organization as fitting hand in glove with that building.
Well, I'm talking about in the future, all the artifacts, all the new stuff. What do you do with it? Do you put it in storage? That kind of negates the building? That's kind of, I'm thinking long-term down the road, if we put this into a historical district.
I don't think that makes the use of the building as for the Historical Society necessarily permanent, but I believe it would preserve the building itself.
Right, so the building, I think, once it's on the register, very similar to the Rufus Putnam House, it's probably changed its use over the years.
Right.
Yes. But it will always be a historic landmark and on the register, and we'll have some of those, as we mentioned, at a high level, some of those restrictions. And then obviously if, not to say this would ever happen, but if the town ever parted ways with any of those buildings, that sort of restriction and designation would follow throughout this sale process. But this also doesn't restrict the town or any person who owns a building on the register from selling the property, for example. And again, I'm not suggesting the town should do that, but very similar to the Putnam House, if the owners wanted to sell that, they could.
I mean, I love its location. I think you come into town and if it's done right, that will be a fantastic place for people to go and research town. I'm just concerned of the viability of its size and its complexity in terms of what needs to be done to keep that building. And if we make it historical, what does that mean?
Through the chair for a second, Austin, when you say they could sell the Rufus Putnam house, right? Is it?
Yeah.
But they still can't do anything with the house, they can buy it, but it still is to stay the Rufus Putnam house.
So I think it will always be designated there, but so if they need to do modifications and if they intend on using state or federal funding, it would trigger that review, but I don't believe there's any restrictions for local funding. Maybe
Yeah,
Jen, do you
I
know
just
more?
looked it up, yeah, it says listing in the National Register in no way interferes with a property owner's rights to alter, manage, or sell the property when using private funds unless some other regional and or local ordinance or policy is in effect. If you use state or federal funds to alter your property or need state or federal permits, the alteration will be reviewed by the MHC staff. Local funding and permitting do not trigger MHC review. So if we wanted to use, if CPA passes and we wanna use CPA funds for capital improvements, it sounds like that's local, that wouldn't trigger any, we could do whatever we would like to with those funds based on approval
That
of
sounds
the
like a
town.
pipe dream to me.
Well, CPA, that one might be a little bit more complicated because it does have that state
Doesn't happen that way.
match with CPA, so,
That's true, that
you know,
might
I
be a
don't know
little
if they
bit
consider
different.
that
I would just,
Local fund.
real estate money, yeah.
like, I look at it this way, take the emotion out of it, I know there's a lot of people in this town that grew up in town and they see that, the artifacts are in that house. They're in the house. I think as a community, we do everything we possibly can to protect our town's, artistic, effect. Problem I have is 40 years from now, when a lot of us in this room won't be here, probably, the future, how is it gonna benefit Rutland when 40 years from now? It's gonna be a different world, and I'm trying to think the location. Like I said, I wanna do everything we can to preserve what's inside that house. I think it's our obligation to the town to do that. The house itself is gonna be a constant financial issue. And if we're serious as a board about developing this town, that's the perfect location for a future town building or a senior center or anything. Which, I mean, I think you guys just signed off on a 3-year extension, right, to the lease for the house in front?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, it was agreed upon or whatnot?
Yep.
Fine, then let's use that 3 years to try and, we're talking about town hall, we're talking about all these things we're trying to get done. Why would we wanna handcuff ourselves? Cause the reality of it is once you do this, it's permanent. You can sugarcoat it any way you want. Once you make this historical, it's done. It's done. It'll never, 100 years from now, that place, you're still gonna be patching the roof and making repairs and you're gonna be tripping, that's the way I look at it. I'm thinking 40 years down the line, the town is gonna look back on this day or a day and say, what the hell did we, cause it's the stuff, for me anyways, it's the stuff in the building. That's the historic, that's Rutland. Rutland's inside that house. The outside is just a structure, it means nothing. I understand, I hate to say nothing, I know there are people that are emotional about it, that's what I'm saying. If we take the emotion out of it and look at it from a, moving forward as a community, I don't know, to me, it doesn't make any sense.
So I think the board, last year's board in, I believe it was December or January, had written a letter of support for the society to move forward the Wood House on the Mass Historic Commission. That the board at the time had supported that movement. That came back, my understanding, with some of it was the lease, the concern with the lease, the long-term feasibility of that and who the applicant was and if the town should be the applicant or if the society should be the applicant and everything. The other piece, it sounds like, is that the Mass Historic Commission is saying that really they would like to see both the house, even though the house and the studio are two separate parcels, they would like to see those two parcels go forward together, and not just the house or just the studio. Is that my correct understanding? And I think by placing it or them on any sort of registry shows, and this again, Tom, to your point, there's a lot of emotion involved and some of the history involved, but shows that there's a commitment to those structures staying as what they are, and continuing to build that historic significance in town. I think some of the feedback that we get, even through kind of the master plan and everything, is the town's not really good about preserving history of the structures. That we're a very old town, and we can take Rutland House of Pizza as an example, right? That there's the conversations, that's the front part of that building is very old, and if you go back and look at all the historic pictures, it's a focal point in a lot of those pictures. But the town doesn't have we don't have a historic district, we don't have a historic district management or anything of that nature. So it's really been left up until this point as far as the independent private property owners to move forward. And I think a larger conversation would be if the commission is willing to kind of work with some of the private property owners to see if they would be amenable to education as to what that would look like for their property, similar to what Rufus Putnam House had gone through. But I think for the town right now, if the town pursues it, and these, I'm not looking, I don't think we'll have any motion tonight or anything, but it's more fact finding, what are the concerns, what information do we want, and everything, is that by putting them on the registry essentially preserves them as the structures that they are, regardless of what their use is or who the owners are. So I
But
think
how does that
that's,
benefit the town? That's my question. So we preserve that structure out there, and where do we go from there?
no,
Cause we're gonna have to constantly repair it throughout the decades. We're gonna have to constantly pump money into it, and we don't have it.
well, and I think that this is a little bit is if it is on and the town continues to maintain ownership, then it opens up additional grant opportunities that then we would be susceptible or held to the requirements that the property requires to meet. But I'm
But
just,
that's a hope. That's a hope. The grants aren't guaranteed.
Right.
And the way the economy's going right now, I don't see grants falling out of the sky anytime soon. I mean, I don't know.
Another question? So I understand, was it the state or the federal that said it would be better if you apply for the studio and the Woodhouse, or was that the Historical Society's recommendation?
That was the state, that was the Massachusetts Historical Commission, that's under the Secretary of State's office.
Interesting. I mean, I can see and understand the Woodhouse. The Wood Studio, that borders on a lot of great land that something else could be used for, and making that historical, if we combine it, that's the problem I have. Is it really ties the town's hands in a growth phase going forward for 20 years from now. What does this town look like? It's not gonna look like it does now. So I guess that, that's my concern.
Is there something that, I mean, you don't have to answer, if there's no answer, this is okay. Is there something in mind from anybody that might be? You mentioned that this land has a lot of potential. I'm just wondering exactly what you might have in mind, if anything.
We're going through a building phase now, Austin, looking at all sorts of places for the town, the buildings, where all that kind of stuff, correct? We're investigating that, so that is looking at what's the potential there. If we have to expand, do we move that to a different place because we're preserving the building? Or do we, so I mean, it's no answer right now, but that's just a thought I had. And I appreciate you looking at it, but that's just a thought.
Paul, do you have any?
I was just gonna say, I'm a little bit confused by your statement there. In other words, okay, so you have the land out there next to the Wood Studio. That might be usable for expansion of perhaps the Woodhouse type of museum or that sort of a situation. In other words, there is land there that can be used, and so if you're going to designate it as historical, then, you know, they might help to have a plan of some sort in place to do that.
If I may, I guess one of my questions is for the Wood Studio parcel, there is some land, I think the land that we're speaking about is the land kind of behind the studio going down towards Memorial Field track area. And what would a restriction on the land piece of it look like versus, you know, I think oftentimes when we hear of the historic restrictions, we think solely on, or I think solely on kind of the exterior of the building and then make sure that any additional development fits into the character and everything of the space, but I don't know if it's on a parcel, and I don't know what building code, because that's a parcel, what that process, if we could even do anything with it as it stands right now, given that it's a parcel to that whole piece.
I'm not sure, I can try to look into that a little bit more.
And it doesn't have to solely be
Yeah,
on
so
you.
hypothetically, is the parking lot, if this was considered historic, would the parking lot be in violation of Mass Historic codes? I don't know, right? Yeah, does it apply to just the building or the parcel altogether?
Right. And
I guess there's ways that you could probably maneuver that. You could maybe subdivide it a little bit more and just, you know, kind of make the parcel a little bit smaller and just only to apply to the building if that was something that was in dire need for example, a municipal complex or something like that.
And I think this was a conversation that we had even in when we had looked at the whether or not to support the wood house, was knowing that one of the biggest concerns for all of the buildings is ADA accessibility and how that can be done. And I think, and I don't wanna, I would have to go back and re-review the Mass Historic Commission guidelines or regulations, but I thought that there was some I don't wanna say leeway, but they were a little bit more lenient for ADA compliance and everything in buildings, but I don't know for sure how that looks. So that's another consideration, because the Wood Studio has had we've done some work to bring it more into ADA compliance than the houses for sure. And so what that would look like.
Not sure again about the ADA leniency as of yet, but I would assume there would be something, given that you're dealing with old buildings.
How long does it take to get registered? A year, 2 years, 3 years?
Basically, we would have to get our application submitted to Massachusetts Historical Commission, and after that point, it's up to them. The previous Historical Commission has been they tried for years to get several properties and landmarks onto the state register, and frankly, they got the runaround, from what I can tell.
Would you know or have any idea why?
Really, all I can go by is whatever correspondence that they left. As you probably know, the previous commission, the members have they've all died except for one who moved away.
Okay.
So we
Through
kind
the
of
chair, I mean, I've heard numerous times, up until a year ago when this started coming up, people assumed it was already historical. So I just think, like everything else in this town, everyone just kept saying it is what it is, and went throughout their day, no one ever actually filed anything officially. Because when I moved into town, everyone told me, even when I ran for, everyone told me, oh, that's historical, that's historic. And it wasn't when they looked it up. So I mean, like a lot of things in town, people think it is because everyone tells them it is, and it's not, you know? Until you actually look into it.
And I think that that's one of the conversation points, is if everyone thinks it is and it isn't, by not being, we've missed out on a whole lot of funding opportunities that could have brought both buildings into much better repair than what they are right now.
Yeah, woulda,
And
coulda, shoulda, I mean,
so
but we're here now.
I think that's one of the conversation right now, is this a direction that the town wants to go? And I say the town, and it's ultimately, I think you're asking for the board's letter for ultimately down the road would be looking for a select board letter of support to the commission moving forward, working with the society to get it added. And I think we, the previous board, it was all of us, but the previous board heard a lot of feelings about the Wood House when we were going through the conversation with the lease and the grant agreement and everything around that. And so I want to try to take the emotion out of this conversation and really try to piece together what information we still need before we as a select board feel comfortable making any sort of movement. But and I'm sure the public will be reaching out to all of us.
Well, that's all right. But through the chair, like,
Yeah.
I totally respect what you guys are doing, I really do, and I understand the connection people have to that. But as a board, as elected professionals, we're supposed to be representing everyone in town, not just the historical society or board. So we need to be looking 20, 30, 40 years down the line. And that's where I'm coming from. I totally support what you guys are doing up there, I really do. I toured it, it's amazing some of the things that are in that house. I'm just thinking at it, I hate to use the old cliche, but it's not personal, it's business, right? I'm thinking on the part of is this good business for Rutland? That's all, that's my only stance on this.
And, sorry,
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I would like to go back and look at our original letter in support of the Wood House, because I don't necessarily remember it being, I remember it for sure being the state, but I remember there being additional conversation as to how it differed if it went to the national, and I don't believe that the original letter was for it to go up to the national, but I don't know what that process is, and I don't remember off the top of my head, so I meant to follow up.
What you guys talked about and what you did on the letter that
Yeah,
drafted, sure.
I don't remember how that conversation went.
So many years ago, more than 10, because I have 10 years worth of town reports in my house. And so, I generally will throw out the last one when a new one comes in, so on and so forth. So I keep 10 years for basically my own edification. But at any rate, remembering many years ago, there was a move that was put through as a town meeting article to have the center of town declared a historical district.
Yes,
And it failed at town meeting,
correct.
okay? And I just can't remember how long ago it was, but it was not anything very recently.
For all I know, things may have changed a little bit as far as attitudes toward that, I don't know. You'd have to, I guess we'd probably have to bring something like that before town meeting to find out. Yeah, to Leah's point, my understanding as far as the National Register would be that the state Mass Historical Commission would have to recommend the property for the National Register. As the Historical Commission, we wouldn't be able to do that directly.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Do you know do you have a date for which the studio was built?
The studio, I don't have a date on me. I can get it if you want it.
Well, I'm just thinking, was it built when he built the house, or was it built many, many years after?
I can't tell you for certain, but I believe it was a little bit after. I believe the house came first, and there was actually a hotel that was, if I remember correctly, that was on that same property. I might have the wrong plot of land here.
It's okay.
But that wasn't the first house that was built on that site. It just happened to be a house that had its most famous occupant.
You're right. I remember hearing that too, okay? So yes, and I'm trying to think back, and I just, there's too many cobwebs and too many dust mites in the way, so anyways, but for what it is, yeah, okay, there was a house there, and this is essentially the second structure that was built there, yes.
Just so I was able to see an inventory form on the Mass Historic Commission's website. It looks like information here says of interest is a small one-story shingled Cape-style cottage at the rear of the lot, built around 1938 as the artist studio for Franklin Tyler Wood.
So the studio was built in
Okay.
1938. Okay.
So I think I think we have some information that we would like to continue to pursue. I think the biggest thing is kind of what limitations any sort of recommendation would be on the building in the parcel itself, if we were to recommend it. And I know, like I said, I know we had gone through some of that with the Wood House, but it was strictly on the Wood House and not the studio, so. And then how that would especially, I think, kind of look at the ADA accessibility, availability piece as well. And again, kind of to Tom's point, the long-term future, I don't remember off the top of my head the historic portion of the master plan, the most updated that planning board is still reviewing. But it might be worth kind of looking at that also to see what, the community that.
That was the other issue, is that we don't know what's going in the master plan.
So we have the draft, we can look at, meet and,
Yeah.
but, yeah. So we.
Leah, if I may, is with regards to the ADA accommodations, are you asking, can they be made without or with?
With, I think if it were to be placed on any sort of registry, kind of what restrictions, obviously it's if we're using state, national, or state, like public funds, but what restrictions that might look like if we wanted to, on the parcel side, we have the parking lot there, but also thinking more long-term if we wanted to use some of the lawn of it for something. And then also the structure, exterior structure, especially as far as ADA accessibility and everything. I don't know how strict they are on the interior as much as it is the exterior.
Quick question, Austin, on the parking, where the land comes out, the lawn comes down and it's paved, is that the town's fire department property? Or is that parking accessibility for them? Or they don't really have any parking except in that circle area?
I think you lost me geographically, so
I'm
so
looking
are you
at the
talking,
building.
are you talking about the fire station at this
Yes.
point? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's all town property, right, but, yeah, so the fire parking lot, goes right to the edge of the pavement, there's some millings there. Because they do use some of the vehicles, some of the larger vehicles, they need kind of that swing radius. But that is kind of the fire parking lot, however, because the Wood Studio is located, behind, it's also kind of the public driveway for people that are either going to the Wood Studio or going around the building.
I'm thinking more of the wood house.
Yeah, so it's interesting, they use kind of the half circle in front, and then they also either park on the grass or they'll use some of the parking spaces that are typically used by the fire staff.
But really, their only parking space is that round circle. So if it becomes historical 20 years down the road, a lot more people wanna go there. How do, what's the complications of making a parking lot there? Cause it is right in the center of town.
So I think we have a few questions and we'll try to get some answers and then do you have a I don't know the timeline from the society as far as moving, cause this was kind of the first I had heard that they were recommending the two parcels going together, so
It's our understanding that the Historical Society isn't actually gonna pursue it any further, which is why it came to us to do. I don't think they have the capacity to do it, so we're starting to look into it and we're trying to get all the information that we know of, what has already been done, what's already out there, what still needs to be done, just to understand everything. So yes, it's very preliminary, so I don't think there's a specific timeline at this point, it's just
Necessarily.
something that we're trying to understand what the process is and what's involved and certainly get the answers to questions that the board has.
and maybe at some point it would be worthwhile seeing if someone from the Mass Historical Commission can either attend like one of your meetings or one of our meetings, or we can do it as a joint meeting or something also, just if this is a interest of the Historical Commission as a whole, and working with, even private landowners and everything, kind of to have, to be able to speak to some of the process and considerations and everything maybe.
Alright. Yeah, I may be able to, I've been in touch with one of the members of the Barry Historical Commission. I don't know if Barry has had anything quite similar to this in that it's town property. But I've been trying to pick her brain a little bit too.
I don't know if Holden has an active historic commission or not, cause I think they have a historic district in the center of town.
Yes.
So I don't know, and I think some of those are some of their town buildings as well as a number of private buildings, so something along those lines also might be beneficial. Is the board comfortable with kind of just having questions out there and seeing? It seems like it's not a super high want from the board at this point, but
It's not a priority, I don't think, no, with everything else going on.
but I think also for,
I don't
you
think
know,
so.
I think kind of as, personally, I think looking as if CPA passes and then knowing that there's allocations to be used designated for historic preservation, what that looks like, and how that looks and everything. And again, not specifically for either of those properties, but as a potential option.
So perhaps it's not an immediate concern until after we find out if we have CPA money.
I mean, I think it's still worth continuing the conversation and seeing the information that comes out of it. But I think if CPA passes, it definitely
It
opens up
helps.
other avenues.
Yeah.
If CPA passes and it's not a historical property, there's still ways that we can allocate money to it as a historical property. But it would help if CPA passes, that it would be designated a historical site. If CPA doesn't pass, having it on the register would still allow us to pursue those other grant opportunities to help with the capital needs and keeping it up to date and available for the public.
So basically, it's the idea is to get as many opportunities for those two buildings as we can.
Get money that the town's
Yeah.
town doesn't have to funnel the money into it, that we can get.
Especially with all the money that we've had to put into it the last few years, the deferred maintenance.
It's just Band-Aids.
Yeah, we wanna try to get it what it needs. And really keep it viable for the long term.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
If you have any questions, please feel free to email me and
Thanks, Peter. I appreciate you coming out.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Interestingly enough, the Massachusetts Central Tree on Center Tree Road or Central Tree Road is also a cultural, it's listed on the cultural inventory.
Yeah, it's on
Which is kind of
private
interesting.
property.
It also says demolished, cause I think it had like Elm's disease. I'm
The original
perusing all
tree
of these
isn't there,
interesting
yeah.
Yeah, the tree's
landmarks.
still there, isn't it?
Not the original.
Not the original,
No,
No.
it's a fraud.
because the one when I drove by, it was right there on the corner, and
Yeah.
that's gone?
Oh, it's still there, it's just not the original Central
Oh.
Tree.
I think
Alright,
that was.
As you guys were discussing, I was deep in a bunch of
Yeah.
stuff.
Thank you. We have a draft policy for the town line welcome signage. Thank you, Tamika, for kind of pulling this together, and I know it's been on and off our radars for a year or so. A number of years ago, a select board had authorized the town administrator at the time to work with local businesses to put the welcome to Rutland signs up. I believe there's 5 or
There's 9.
9?
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice, signs, huh?
Of these? Oh, really? At different town lines. And they were sponsored by local businesses to fund the cost of the signs themselves. And it was, I believe, a 5-year agreement that is now pushing into the 6th year, I think.
Yeah.
And so there's been a few businesses that have reached out kind of looking to buy additional, like re-up their sponsorship or purchase sponsorship of a sign or something. And so this is a policy, kind of an application / policy similar to the one-day liquor licenses for interested local businesses to be able to purchase a sponsorship signage, similar to what is out there now. If you are coming up from 122 up 122A, the one there on 122A is the Friends of Rutland, I believe. There's a number of local realtor companies, realty companies that have sponsorship. And so it would be something similar to that. The thought, I think, being again amenable to the board, the cost would be sponsorship to cover their sponsorship sign, and then also maybe a little bit of extra to provide plantings or some sort of maintenance around the sign, kind of the beautification around the sign. This is just a draft policy. I wanted, Tamika put it together because she's been the one fielding all the questions. And knowing that it should be on the board's radar. So it's not, I'm not looking for adoption or anything right now. This is just a draft policy to consider and continue thinking and move forward. I know they were originally done almost 6 years ago, there was some folks were not so happy about having sponsorship. I believe the sponsorship was done in a tasteful manner, that it wasn't an overt take over the sign kind of manner. And so keeping it kind of in the spirit with what's been done currently would be the intent. And that would be able to also provide any sort of maintenance that the signs themselves would need or anything as well. So I believe.
Yeah, so if I may, Austin and I have searched extensively and really found nothing as far as any sort of documentation or communication regarding this. So we kind of started from scratch, and Austin came up with some, what if scenarios, and I thought of a couple more and tried to add it in there. For example, one of the signs right now is advertising a business that no longer exists, so what do we want to do when that situation happens? How do we want to make it equitable? There are some things in there that I left highlighted to kind of leave at the board's discretion of, do you want to keep it at a 5-year sponsorship? What does that dollar amount look like? The initial one was $1,900. That also included the making and purchasing of the actual wood signs plus the sponsorship. So in this case, we would just be replacing the sponsorship signs, but Austin made a great point that, they're still gonna need maintenance. Leah pointed out maybe we wanna, kind of make them look a little bit better and do landscaping at the bottom. So, what does that cost look like? I listed on there all of the locations where they can be found, and giving like a first and second option for folks if they wanna, if they have a specific location that they have in mind, but also, noting that may not be an option, but we'll try our best. So really, we're just looking for any sort of feedback that the board has on what you would like this to look like, essentially.
What was the original cost?
$1,900 per sign.
And that was it? There were no additional fees?
No.
Okay. And it says the design will be submitted to the vendor for production. Is that their vendor or ours? Because it looks like we get to pick RFP the vendor, so to speak.
Correct. So, we're not certain what the procurement process looked like the first time around, so we would ensure to put out an RFP and make sure that we were following the proper procurement process. And then ultimately, that would be the vendor on behalf of the town. The applicant would be responsible for providing the design based on the specifics that the vendor would need to be able to do it, but it would all be done through the same
And
vendor.
would the DPW install the sign?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Are they purchasing, like we have the wood logo, the town of Rutland, are they
Yes.
purchasing that besides the
No.
logo?
So there's a smaller sign underneath the
I
Welcome
see
to Rutland
that,
sign.
right.
Yep, so the Welcome to Rutland sign would stay the same as it is now.
Oh,
And then the sponsorship signs are able to be taken on and off.
okay.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Have you had a lot of inquiries about?
Yes,
Sponsors?
mostly from the businesses that currently have signs up there. I think my thought, and of course, we would appreciate the board's feedback, is trying to keep it equitable so that all businesses have an opportunity to go up and it's not the same businesses all the time. With that being said, I don't know if we would have 9 businesses come forward where we would need to do like a lottery. But I did put that on there, as an option of how we would handle it if we had more applicants than we did sign locations. I think there might be one business now that actually has it at 2 locations. So that was something we considered too, would we allow that? Are we only doing one at each location, But yes, there have been some increase.
I apologize for not reading thoroughly through this now, but what if somebody doesn't want that sign and they want another sign that somebody already has?
So what I did on the application was I listed the 9 locations and I said to please mark your first and second choice. And then I put a disclaimer on there that said, we will make our best effort to give you your first or second choice. If we can't, we can't. We will notify you of the location where your sign is. So if somebody came back and was like, I'm just not interested anymore, then we just wouldn't move forward.
Okay. Very well.
I kind of question, because to me it sounds like this is, at least the way it started, if we continue with 5 years, it's every 5 years, then we'll take new considerations. So in the like you said, in here, there's already one for a business that's not in business anymore that could be taken down. Wouldn't
So I
it,
did
if
include
that
that.
happened like 2 years into the 5-year cycle,
Yep.
if somebody else wanted it, would that
Yeah,
not
so we
allow
can.
us to?
No, so this is the board's policy, so I had put something in there about if the business goes out of business, we would take the sign down, you'd have X number of days to pick it up or it would be disposed of. If the board wants to say in there, they'll either open the lottery again or they'll go back to the list and maybe take somebody that didn't get a chance to do the sign. It's totally your policy. You can put in it whatever you would like, and it doesn't have to be 5 years. That's what they chose the first time. You could make it less, you could make it more. We've had a few new businesses that have opened in town in the last 5 years that may want an opportunity to take advantage of getting their names out there. But yeah, it's completely up to you guys.
I remember some of the conversation when the signs first went in 5 years was because it was essentially purchasing the Welcome to Rutland sign itself. And so we wanted, the board at the time, I think, wanted to have it be of value for purchasing the sign
Like get your
essentially.
money's worth kind of thing.
Where now 5 years is just default what it was, there could be value to having it every 2 year, I would say not quite every year, only because if we're doing any sort of like maintenance or whatever, that there's
Yeah.
something there, but that 5 years does seem to be an extended length
Yeah,
of
that
time.
was gonna be my next comment. 5 is a long time. When you have, particularly with our push to bring new business into town, new commercial into town, and not give them an opportunity, it's a long time.
Sure.
And then, like I said, there was a significant amount of conversation at the time. Also, I think it was a minority, but a vocal minority, who did not appreciate having any sort of sponsorship and just thought that they should just be welcome to Rutland signs without any sort of sponsorship.
Into that, I could almost say if you don't want to have one, you can allow somebody to purchase it and choose not to put something up. They
Do it
could just purchase,
anonymously or whatever,
as an option.
But this is not for individuals, right? Strictly
No,
companies?
so I did put
Just
in
for
there that it
business,
has to be for businesses.
Okay.
The business name has to be included in the sign. Or I said that, you don't have to keep that. But I would argue that, with the push towards economic development, that it would seem that this would be a nice way to kind of help to get our local businesses out there.
Yeah.
And
And I think it
Yeah,
moves away some of that, like some of the more potential questionable or kind of nefarious entity, like, and I don't wanna suggest that that definitely would happen, but we can think back to some of the other more
Yes.
recent things that have happened.
So I put specifications in there of what would be allowed, what wouldn't be allowed. The final design is up to the select board, so nothing would go to the vendor without it being
It still has
approved
to go
first.
through.
There's proper channels that it has to go through.
If we're making a push for EDC, bringing business in, what would be your thoughts on rotational? 1 year, 2 year, 3 year? So that if somebody wants a 1 year and not again, then somebody else can come in. And then you have 2 year spots available or 3 year spots available.
I mean,
So that you do have that alternate to give somebody a chance.
so you could offer staggered, so you could offer 1 year, 2 year, 3 year slots, you pay more for the longer of your, for the, so if.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, so it doesn't have, I think that's a great idea, and then you don't have to keep it the same for everybody, but yeah.
I kinda like that, and then having, some of the things in here we're talking about, if they haven't had one before, I almost like the idea better of, rather than having them all on the same cycle, having that rolling, and then if you're interested, put your name on a list and you get contacted when a spot opens up, do you want this one? Do you wanna wait for a 2 year? Or have a
Right.
separate list, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, whatever it is for which ones.
Cause I noticed in here you do give preference to new people who wanna do
Yeah.
it. So if it's on that rotation, then at least a business has an opportunity that they don't have to wait so long
Sure.
to pick up one.
I know that might be a little bit more of a maintenance thing on the paperwork side if we're offering multiple
I
different.
don't mind that at all,
I
yeah,
kinda like that idea here.
sure.
I do.
Yeah, and I think once we have something that the board is amenable to and it's, essentially policy / application, similar to like the liquor licenses and everything, that it's there and it just becomes part of the
Right.
process.
Yeah. Yep.
So I think if you have, I think some of the cost was just left unknown more so is, it's essentially kind of what the board wants, the whatever the cost of the sign itself is there a certain overage that then the board wants based on for maintenance and beautification? Or does the board only want to charge essentially the cost of the sign itself? I was personally leaning towards some sort of overage for maintenance / beautification. But I'm not sure.
My other question to the board was, I had put language in there that if the sign gets damaged or, something happens to it, that it's the financial responsibility of the business to replace it. We could take that out if you included enough of that in the cost. I would say if you didn't necessarily wanna include that in the cost, we should keep something in there. Maybe they're not responsible for the wooden sign itself, but at least for their sponsorship sign, so that any funds we do have that in that account, we can use towards the wooden sign if we need to, cause they have unfortunately been damaged over the years, some on purpose, some
got
just
stolen,
from the
didn't
weather.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see it, when I read that, my thought is, you got a guy on a snowy road, he's coming, takes out the whole sign. Now we're asking this guy to pay for it all over again, through no fault of his own.
Right.
You're saying the sponsor hit the sign? Maybe his insurance would pay for it in that case.
So I think I wanted to thank you, Tamika and Austin, for kind of putting this together, and we have some comments and feedbacks. We can kind of, if you have additional as you go through it, send them along to Tamika and we can kind of work it out and then bring it forward. Maybe not at our next meeting,
Yeah, that's fine. We just thought if we got it on paper, it at least gave you like a starting point, instead of just a very broad stroke conversation,
and then I think also looking at when do we want it to start? Is it gonna be like a calendar year, a fiscal year? Is it going to be kind of at the spring when everything starts to fall? Just logistics, that piece.
My thought is maybe we go through the administrative process of it in the wintertime, getting applications in, having the signs made, and then we set like a date in the spring when DPW can access the signs and the snow has melted, that they could then do the installation, and then we start the process again on the calendar year, depending on what cycle. And, and maybe we look at the locations of the sign and the board decides what locations they want for the longer term signs, like maybe you wanna see certain locations that have more cycle, or maybe you don't care based on the location too, just something else to consider.
That's a good point.
Cause some are obviously more highly visible than others.
Is there any concern with DPW being able to maintain the area around the signs?
No, I think that's why, so my recommendation is almost sort of set this up at, towns that have town cemeteries. The funds that are charged to, unfortunately, folks that need the services of a cemetery go into a perpetual care fund for maintenance and upkeep of the cemetery. And then when work is done by the community on the cemetery, they pull from that trust fund. So you almost sort of develop a nice little pot of money to be able to maintain these. So I think they have the availability and just staff time. Obviously, it needs to be scheduled. But I think having a sustainable resource, I think to the point about the one that was damaged, that actually hit our free cash last year, 2 years ago. So unfortunately, it didn't have enough funds in that account to support the program. So my recommendation would be consider that long-term, so DPW can upkeep it, and then if there's any damage or anything, we can absorb the cost of replacement there.
And it's not coming from one individual sponsor specifically.
Cause I think everyone would agree taxpayer dollars probably shouldn't go into this initiative.
Right.
So if we can, everybody just take a look and continue to think and everything and send, commentary in through Tamika and Austin, and then in a couple meetings, we can kind of revisit and see how it goes.
Great first start.
Yeah, thank you guys for the consideration.
Great first start.
And next we have the September primary election. We need to sign the warrant for the September 3rd primary. This is the state primary. And this is a formality that we as a board need to do. And I believe we have a sample motion in our pack. We have the draft of the warrant provided to us. Once it's signed, it will be posted. It must be posted no later than August 20th.
Make a motion to sign the warrant as presented for the September 3rd primary election pursuant to MGL Chapter 54, Section 12, right?
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Questions, conversation, concerns? Hearing none. Roll call.
Madam Chair, just
Oh, sorry.
make sure if you wanna vote in the primary, register to vote is the end of this month, the 24th, I think, of August.
So, thank you, Austin. That was just to reiterate the deadline to register to vote for this primary if you're not already registered, if you wanna change affiliations or any update address or anything, is the end of this month. We believe it's August 24th.
Definitely don't wanna be the guy that wants to vote in a particular and you find out that you're in like Green Rainbow.
Right.
I think has happened to a lot of people.
I think that this is,
Green Rainbow, really?
Yeah, oh yeah.
this is,
Never mind, I don't wanna call her out, but
this is because it's a primary, it'll be you'll have the party ballots where you can go in and you, if you are registered with the party, you get that ballot, and if you are registered as an unenrolled individual, you get to choose which ballot you want, just from a process perspective. So, we have a motion and a second. Roll call. Harry?
Second, aye.
Mattson, aye.
Ledger, aye.
Galvin, aye?
Whitman, aye. Our next meetings are regular scheduled August 19th. Jen, I think you said
I won't be available for that one.
and if anyone else isn't going to be around, please let me know, just so we can ensure we have quorum. And then we have September 3rd, which is a Tuesday, because that's the day after the Labor Day holiday. And then Monday, September 16th are our upcoming meetings. And as always, any agenda request items, please go through me, Tamika, Austin, the three of us work on it. Any other business to come before the board?
Could we possibly ask the town administrator to give us an update on how we're looking for our income and our expenses for the year as we start out next meeting?
yeah, so I can give you the update now. You won't get an update because they're still closing the books. So you were sent a final budget to expense report
Yeah.
from Donna. There's some encumbrances and some things that need to be reflected in that report, so if you look at that report, that won't tell you the whole story. We will not close the books until probably mid to late September. So we'll have a really good idea what that looks like in terms of the expenses and also potentially what a free cash figure looks like.
I've looked at it many times, but does the expense report show where we stand for the year? Like, here's our budget, here's where we're looking at. Are we gonna be at the end of the year short, or are we gonna be under budget, over budget?
So
How do we know that on an ongoing basis?
yes, you won't be short, so you'll recall the most recent report you have has about $800,000 in unexpended budget to actual. However, there's some considerations in there. For example, the cable program, the way that works is at the end of the year, the accountant actually looks at what the actual expenditures were. And she will only pull that amount expended from the revolving fund. So the unexpended money will go back to the PEG revolving fund, so that actually will lower what will look like a turn back for us. So just a ballpark, I don't have the numbers at the top of my head, we'll go from about 800,000 unexpended to, just for example, 700,000. Because she won't actually pull that money as a expense or revenue source. So it'll give you a ballpark in where you are, but again, there's still some encumbrances for the end of the year, some bills that need to be paid that weren't reflected by June 30th or that final warrant a couple weeks ago. And then some of the things that I just mentioned as well. So, but you're in a good spot. We definitely won't be in the negative for
2024.
2024.
What about 2025? Any idea of, because you had mentioned that we might be looking favorable with some additional money, and how would that reflect on, say, quarterly? Could you give us an idea on a quarterly basis where we stand in projection for the year? Of
So do you mean expenses or revenue?
Both.
So you get monthly expense reports from the accountant, so that gives you an idea where you are. The challenge is it would be way too early to forecast the year right now. We're a month in. We have some large expenditures at the beginning of the year, like our pension, our health insurance, our liability insurance, so we can include that in our projections, but as you know, organizations, like we didn't expect a $40,000 emergency boiler repair for the school last year, right? So those you can never take into account. Revenue is best on quarterly basis. Obviously, we had change in the treasurer's office this year, so the reconciliations were not up to date due to that change in staffing. But I'm confident actually, so I think they're pretty close to fully reconciling up until the end of the fiscal year. But that's a two-part process, so now Donna, the accountant, and Nick, our new treasurer, are reconciling their books together. So we'll have a pretty good idea about what FY24 cash looks like. And then I'm confident that moving forward, we'll be in a much better position reconciling our revenue quarterly. I did provide, for the first 2 quarters, I provided revenue and expense quarterly reports. I intend to continue that in FY25.
I guess when the budget was done, it was done with a forecast. So I guess maybe I'm not making myself clear in that if we could do a quarterly forecast, like the budget came in needing money. So where do we stand? Because I believe the budget for 25 was like 800,000 under, over budget. So on a quarterly basis, could we see how that goes forward? Because we forecast a budget, so how do we keep track of how we're doing for that budget? So do we need to make corrections throughout the year? Are there things we need to be considering where we don't end up in that kind of a deficit again, Austin? I guess is what I'm asking to look at.
Yeah, so I would love to get to that point where I think we have a little bit more control and command on our spending. Right now, I don't think we have adequate resources in our finance department to have some of those internal controls that are necessary. One of the best ways to do that is a purchase order system. We just don't have the staff capacity in our finance department to do that. That would really, if you have purchase orders, you really have much more authority and command on spending because all purchases need to be approved over a certain dollar threshold, as you know. Whereas right now, what you're signing tonight has already happened. Right, so there's really not a level of control, if you will, from myself or the board really at this point. I have some ideas to improve that, so I can provide what I think are more accurate reports. But again, also, we have, the budgets are managed respectively by their departments. So they have their internal spreadsheets, and they have a better understanding about what their actual and what their projected spending is. That's something that's not reflected to finance committee or the select board at this point. So we can try, it's almost sort of like pulling teeth a little bit, we can ask a department. Like I joke with the public works director, he had, as you saw in the budget report, he had a very big turn back. He had some unfilled positions. And I think he's comfortable with me saying this, cause we joked in public, I said, so what's your projected turn back gonna be for the year? And he said 0, right? Because the way that we have spending right now is quite literally, if he wanted to spend all that money, he could. Because we don't have some of those internal controls that are necessary for an operation of this size, so.
I guess I'm the individual who says, we don't have an expense problem. We have a revenue problem. Because the town needs to expend so much money to maintain itself. How do we get that extra revenue to make up the shortfall? I guess that's what I'm looking for as we go forward.
We do a pretty good job
That could be
on,
grants or that could be other stuff, but
Yeah.
that's what I'd like a quarterly update on.
to your quarterly question though, we do a pretty good job, I think we're at 98-99% collection rate on taxes. We are usually very conservative on our local receipt projections, so we end up being over budget on most, if not all of those. I think we've exhausted most, if not all, of the local options that are available, like meals tax. If we had hotel, we'd probably have room tax. There are some proposals for some local options, but again, you gotta take that to town meeting. And get town meeting approval for, so for example, there was a proposal by the governor to implement an additional surcharge on motor vehicles, and that would be local revenue. But again, that's like a new tax, right? So, and I think I mentioned to a town administrator next to me at MMA, I'm like, you're gonna propose that first before I do. Because, you know, the last thing that people wanna hear is a new tax, right? So,
And I don't wanna prolong this, I'm just saying, on a quarterly basis, from a financial perspective, I'd like to see how the forecast is looking.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know, and what do we need to do to make up revenue? If we're 600,000 short on our budget, how do we make that up? It's not an expense problem, it's a revenue problem,
yeah.
the way I look
But
at
at
it.
some point, to your point, if you are projecting, and I think we've done that, is take a look at where we are, project that out and see what that's gonna look like. If you make some assumptions through 4 quarters. There are some controls that we can implement if it's looking like we're gonna be short on revenue, like spending freezes, hiring freezes, things like that. This year, I think we're in a position where we didn't have to do that. Obviously, the future, you know, current fiscal year, future fiscal years, I think the board should reserve the right to exercise those.
Okay, all right. Appreciate the board's indulgence, thank you.
Is there any other business to come before the board? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
Second. Motion and a second, roll call, Harry.
Second, aye?
Matt's on.
Ledger, I.
Galvin, aye.
Whitman, I. 7:50.